quiet August night on the Black Sea coast in 1925 seemed to embody the long-awaited peace that had finally settled over the lands of the former empire. In the military state farm called Chebanka, stretched out near Odessa, the air was saturated with the scent of ripe steppe grass and the salty breath of the sea. In one of the cozy houses, a modest dinner was drawing to a close, attended by influential people of that time. Among them stood out the figure of a man whose name made both enemies and allies tremble. This was a legendary commander, whose charisma and energy seemed inexhaustible. He had just finished discussing future plans concerning the development of cavalry units and the strengthening of borders. When he stepped out onto the veranda to enjoy the night coolness, a short flash and a sharp sound, more like the pop of a burst tire, shattered the silence. No one at that moment could imagine that this single incident would put an end to the biography of one of the brightest heroes of the Civil War and mark the beginning of one of the most tangled mysteries of Soviet history. This event became the final chord in the life of Grigory Ivanovich, a man whose path resembled an adventurous novel of the highest caliber. To understand the scale of his personality, one must go back decades, to sunny Bessarabia at the end of the 19th century. Grigory was born in 1881, and from an early age demonstrated a character that could not be confined within the bounds of ordinariness. His biography is a kaleidoscope of daring escapes, expropriations, and incredible luck. Even before the great upheavals of the 20th century swept the country, he was already known as a noble brigand, a kind of local Robin Hood. He possessed an amazing ability to win people over, be they simple peasants or refined ladies from Odessa's high society. His artistry allowed him to change guises and slip from the hands of justice 6 times, turning each arrest into a legend that only fueled interest in his person. With the onset of revolutionary events, his criminal past paradoxically became the foundation for a new, heroic career. In the chaos of 1917, he quickly oriented himself, realizing that the new government needed men of action, unburdened by old conventions. It was then that the transformation of yesterday's convict into a red cavalryman began. He managed to form detachments distinguished by iron discipline and selfless devotion to their leader. His fighters, who were called by his name, became one of the most effective forces on the Southern Front. They fought with such ferocity and professionalism that it earned the respect even of old-school career officers. However, along with military glory, the influence of this man also grew, extending far beyond the army barracks. By the early 20s, a kind of state within a state had practically formed on the territory of what is now the Odessa region and Moldova. Under the leadership of Grigory Ivanovich were not only cavalry divisions, but also enormous economic resources. His units controlled factories, mills, and vast agricultural lands. In conditions of devastation and hunger, his units were shod, clothed, and fed, which created a sharp contrast with the general state of the country. This financial well-being was provided not only through state supply, but also thanks to the commander's amazing entrepreneurship. He introduced a system of cost accounting that allowed the cavalrymen to earn for their own needs. Such a state of affairs could not but provoke sidelong glances from the center, where such autonomy was viewed with great suspicion. On the external level, the conflict was brewing in the highest echelons of power. Grigory Ivanovich's relations with figures such as Kliment Efremovich Voroshilov were far from ideal. In Moscow, there were fears of the excessive strengthening of the popular military leader, who possessed not only military might, but also the support of the local population. His connections with representatives of Latvian circles, who played a key role in state security structures and the party apparatus in those years, caused particular concern. There were whispers that the Bessarabian hero was involved in some shadowy schemes and political intrigues, the goal of which was to create a special status for the border regions. These rumors were fueled by his ambitious project to create the Moldavian Autonomous Republic, in which he saw a springboard for further promotion of ideas for transforming society towards Europe. This man's inner world was no less complex than his political activities. Behind the mask of a steel cavalryman lay a nature prone to luxury and a certain aestheticism. Those who visited his headquarters in Odessa were struck by the decor of the premises and the quality of the reception. He loved expensive horses, quality cloth, and refined society. At the same time, he remained a man of his circle, retaining many habits from his past, illegal life. His manner of communication was a combination of emphasized politeness and hidden threat. He could be incredibly generous to his comrades, but he did not forgive betrayal and weakness. This duality created an aura of mystery around him. Many wondered, who was he really? A soldier devoted to the cause of the revolution? Or an ambitious player using ideology as a facade to realize his own grandiose plans? Grigory Ivanovich's personal ambitions often conflicted with party discipline. He was accustomed to making decisions alone, relying on his intuition and authority. This led to friction with commissars and representatives of the central administration who tried to limit his freedom of action. His personal life was also a subject of discussion. His charisma attracted many people, and these connections were not always dictated solely by political necessity. In Odessa, legends still live on about his passions and how personal sympathies influenced his personnel decisions. It is in this intertwining of the personal and the public that the roots of many dramas that unfolded in those years lie. The ideological and philosophical conflict of the situation lay in the very phenomenon of red Bonapartism. The revolution gave birth to heroes who, by their scale, began to outgrow the system that created them. Grigory Ivanovich was a living embodiment of this contradiction. He believed in the justice of the new order, but he built this justice using methods that resembled feudal rule. In his view, order and prosperity were inextricably linked with his personal will. This was a clash of two concepts of statehood. One assumed strict centralization and the subordination of all resources to a single plan from Moscow, and the other, reliance on strong regional leaders with broad powers. For the young Soviet Republic, striving for uniformity, the presence of such a bright and independent figure became a systemic problem. The transformation of events began in the mid-1920s, when the intra-party struggle for power intensified. After the death of key leaders of the first generation, a redistribution of spheres of influence began. Grigory Ivanovich, who held the post of Deputy People's Commissar for Military and Naval Affairs, found himself at the center of this storm. He was considered a potential contender for even higher positions, which made him a dangerous competitor for those who had already established themselves at the top of Olympus. During this period, his activity in the south of the country took on a new scale. He was actively engaged in arranging the border, strengthening defense capabilities, and developing infrastructure. However, every step he took was now watched by dozens of eyes, recording every careless word and every dubious meeting. An unexpected twist occurred when a man from Grigory Ivanovich's distant past reappeared in his inner circle, Meyer Zader. Once, even in pre-revolutionary times, this man had helped Grigory, who was hiding from persecution, for which Grigory retained a sense of gratitude towards him. After the end of active hostilities, Meyer was assigned to service in the economic structures of the Cavalry Corps. He was quiet, executive, and, it seemed, absolutely devoted to his patron. No one could suspect this modest employee of being an instrument of grand politics or a victim of personal drama. It was the presence of such people, connecting the hero with his criminal past, that gave detractors cause to assert that old habits had not disappeared. The culmination came on the evening of August 6, 1925. The atmosphere in Chebanka was relaxed, almost homely. No one expected trouble. Meyer Zader approached Grigory Ivanovich at the moment when he was most vulnerable and open. The subsequent action was swift and irreversible. Later, during the investigation, Zader put forward a variety of versions, from motives of jealousy to resentment for insufficient attention to his merits. However, the investigation was conducted in an atmosphere of strict secrecy, and many documents still remain inaccessible to a wide range of researchers. It was also strange that the perpetrator himself received a surprisingly mild punishment, and several years later ended his own life under unexplained circumstances at the hands of former subordinates of the deceased commander. The passing of such a significant figure caused a shock in society. Mourning was declared in Odessa and throughout the country. The funeral turned into a grand demonstration of popular love and sorrow. By decision of the government, a mausoleum was erected in the city of Birzula, which was later renamed in honor of the hero. This was an exceptional honor bestowed upon only a few. The body was embalmed, which was meant to symbolize the eternal life of the ideas that this man championed. However, behind the lavish rituals lay a bitter truth. The system had finally absorbed its hero, transforming a living, contradictory man into a frozen symbol, deprived of the right to his own opinion and mistakes. The resonance of this story is felt even today. The fate of the Bessarabian cavalryman is a mirror of an era in which idealism mixed with cruelty, and the striving for progress with archaic methods of governance. It is a reminder of how thin the line is between heroism and arbitrariness, between serving the people and personal enrichment. For the modern viewer and reader, this plot is primarily interesting as an example of how an individual tries to resist the impersonal machine of power. The lessons of this story lie in understanding that no past merits and no wealth can guarantee security in conditions where the rules of the game change on the fly, and yesterday's allies become judges. Today, analyzing the events of those years, we see not just a criminal drama or a political order. We see the tragedy of a man who outgrew his time but could never completely break ties with a dark past. His wealth, which so irritated Voroshilov and other figures, was not just an accumulation of goods, but an attempt to create an island of stability in an ocean of chaos. His disputes with the leadership were not just a whim, but a struggle for the right to a different vision of the future. The mystery of his passing remains open, forcing us to return again and again to those events to find answers to questions about the nature of power, loyalty, and betrayal. Delving into the history of Grigory Ivanovich, we inevitably return to that quiet evening in Chebanka. What was it? An accident? A fatal error? Or a meticulously planned action by those who feared his influence? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, in a gray area where personal grievances intersect with state interests. This man lived his life as if each day were his last, burning himself out in the flame of revolution and his own passions. He left behind not only cities named after him and legends of his exploits, but also an important warning. Power and charisma can elevate one to the top, but they also make a person a target. Concluding this journey in the footsteps of the Red Cavalryman, we see how cyclical history is. We began with a shot in the night and ended with a reflection on eternity. The man who once robbed banks and escaped from the most heavily guarded prisons eventually became part of the state myth. His wealth turned to dust. His disputes with leaders faded into archives, but his image continues to stir the imagination. This is a story about how, Even in the darkest times, a person seeks their own path, tries to build and create, even if their methods cause controversy. Ultimately, what remains significant is not how he ended his earthly journey, but the mark he left on people's hearts and on the fabric of history itself, which, as is known, knows no subjunctive mood. Each generation will find something of its own in this biography. Some will see him as an adventurer and a bandit, others as a great builder and warrior. But one thing remains undisputed. Without figures like this Bessarabian nugget, the history of the 20th century would have been much more faded and predictable. His life was like a bright comet that streaked across the sky and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only glimmers of former greatness and endless questions to which we have yet to find answers. It is this incompleteness that keeps his image alive, forcing us to look into the past again and again, trying to unravel the mystery of a man who knew how to overcome circumstances but could not overcome fate itself. The development of events surrounding his legacy continued after his departure. The mausoleum in Burzula became a place of pilgrimage, but over time even such sanctuaries are tested. During years of new conflicts and border redistributions, the structure suffered, was restored, and again fell into disrepair. This is a metaphor for memory. It is not static. It changes with us. What seemed unshakable in 1930 was perceived differently in the 90s, and is seen in a completely different light now. We look at these events through the prism of 100 years of experience, and understand that reality is always more complex than any schemes. Grigory Ivanovich Kotovsky remains part of our common cultural and historical code, a figure embodying all the contradictions of a great and tragic era. It is in Odessa, the city he loved so much and which reciprocated his feelings, that the spirit of this man is most keenly felt. In the narrow streets of Moldavanka, in the grand halls of the opera house, in the sound of the surf on Lanzarote, everywhere one can encounter the shadows of the past, among which his figure holds an honorable place. He was the flesh and blood of this city, its humor, its enterprise, and its indomitable striving for freedom. And if history is indeed a continuous flow, then personalities like him are the stones that change the direction of the current, creating whirlpools and new channels. We return to the beginning of our narrative, to that very veranda in Chebanka. The silence of the night closes in again over the shore. The events of that time have long become pages in textbooks, but the human drama behind them continues to resonate. We ask ourselves, what did he feel in his last moments? Did he manage to understand that his time was up, or did he believe in his star until the end? There is no answer. There is only the sea, the steppe, and memory, which carefully preserves the image of a man who became a legend in his lifetime and remained a mystery after his departure. The story of this man teaches us that true greatness lies not in the absence of mistakes, but in the scale of a personality capable of taking responsibility for their choices. In a world where everything strives towards averaging, the example of such a bright and independent life serves as a source of inspiration for those who are seeking their own path. And though many mysteries of that era will remain unsolved, the very touch upon them makes us wiser, allowing us to better understand not only the past, but also ourselves in the context of the endless movement of time. Concluding this immersion into the fate of the legendary cavalryman, we realize that his story is not merely a chronicle of past victories and defeats. It is a profound reflection on human nature, on power, and on the price one has to pay for the right to be oneself during pivotal moments in history. We close this page, but the spirit of search and the thirst for justice that drove this man continue to live, reminding us that each of us is the creator of our own unique history, which is woven into the general tapestry of human existence. Thus, before us appears a picture of a life lived to its fullest potential. From the Bessarabian forests to high offices in Moscow, from prison cells to gilded halls, this path was walked with head held high. Grigory Ivanovich Kotovsky remained in history as a symbol of an era, a man paradox whose life was cut short at its peak, but whose name continues to resonate through the decades, reminding us of times when the boundaries of what was possible were defined only by the strength of will and loyalty to one's dream.